Hi, I'm Nick Nelson from Bureau Happold. One of the fundamentals of BIM is collaboration, and you know, you've expressed that. I think we all agree with that. One of the things that concerns me is data formats. And sorry to get down to practicalities, but you know, we were members, many of us, of the International Alliance for Interoperability many years ago, and actually I think it failed miserably. It never achieved any commonality of data. This is the first time I've heard about COBE, and I'm very encouraged by what I hear and read about COBE. That's great news. But do we think the technology providers are really going to adopt that sort of commonality of format and deliver us products that we can use collaboratively across a single data set?
I think that is a great question, and it's one we've asked as well. You know, is the technologies fit for purpose in terms of what we want for COBE? Hence, one of the reasons we've set up as a working group, the Technology Alliance Partners. And the first meeting we had with them was to talk about our data set, to say ultimately what we want is a COBE database. Sometimes the geometry is good, but really it's the data that's an important part for us. Did they listen? Definitely. Within 1 month, we've already started to see if and what we're aiming for, how do you call it, the COBE button, to be able to export that data from whatever the proprietary technology is into and we're starting to see it with one vendor straight away that said, we've listened, we're going to respond. So we're starting to see that happening already. We are confident, you know, we can't tell them, mandate it to them, but we are confident that it's going to happen. We are helping push that journey on with them. I think the first thing was just socialize it with them, say, this is what we want. And if you guys want to improve your sales, then I'm sure you want to respond to market force. But it is a great question, and we're working with the vendors to try and say, this is what we as clients want, and we hope you listen to us. But also on the formatting, we are working, if you like, we have a working party that's starting to look in terms of, if you like, the deliverables. We're just kicking that off yet, so we'll see what happens with that one. But COBE, if you like, is the consistent strand right the way through that whole project life cycle.
Renata Powell, Carbon Trust. I'm quite interested in how the carbon savings are going to be delivered. What's the methodology for modelling energy consumption in operation?
Well, we won't, as I said, be mandating how they do it. We will be setting the targets, and part of the method statement is for industry to innovate and actually respond to that one. We won't actually be telling people how to, through their model. We do see, one of the key questions we're going to ask, if you like, in our data drops is round about, you know, the whole carbon agenda. We'll ask the question, you know, have you validated it? What's your data set? Without telling them how to do it. But again, in terms of technologies, we're confident that we can get the data sets we want.
Hi there, Brian Jukes from Business Fix. I've been working with contractors for 40 odd years. Started as a site engineer, and probably challenge you for that title of yours of the worst site engineer in the world. What came across to me, just going back into my own history in the industry, is that quite often as a contractor you maybe put an idea forward which says, if we spend a little bit more here on the building, you'd save a lot more on the operation of the building. And quite often the answer which comes back is, well, sorry, that's not my budget. So the CapEx, the OpEx manager have got different priorities. What kind of work is being done to try and get these two elements to think together? Because that's a pretty fundamental element to getting BIM to work, I think.
I think that's a great question, if you like. And we talked about changing behaviours, and it's about probably the big thing is not just changing behaviours of the designers, the contractors, but also of the client cost. And if you like, we are working with each department individually to try and make sure, go back to that process, that they start to think right through the project life cycle on the big ball on the right-hand side, as opposed to squeezing down that design and construct. So you're right, it's part of the education process again, that going back to saying don't look purely at CapEx, it's about the whole project life cycle, and that's where the real value is. And I think if you think about BIM in terms of trouser sizes, if you like, you know, the further you go up that whole project life cycle from design and construct up to Excel, that's where the real goal lies for BIM. So I completely agree with you that we've got to get the whole life cost as opposed to just CapEx. So, but again, it's largely down to what the contract route is and what the client's agenda is, but I completely agree that that is the goal in terms of trying to achieve, if you like, most of our savings through the OpEx side.
Do you know if the Treasury are beginning to think that way?
I think it'd be unfair to comment on that at the moment. You say we just started the journey with our clients.
Thank you very much.
Hi there, Mark Taylor, Edinburgh Napier University. It's my understanding that the aerospace industry, certain manufacturing sectors and shipbuilding have been using the equivalent of, or an alternative to BIM for quite some time now. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on where we can learn from these other sectors, and what frustrates me as an academic and having previous industrial experience in construction is that we have great examples of industries and organised companies such as Babcock and other big shipbuilders using very, very complex or software and managing to collaborate successfully. But yet the construction industry really seems to struggle. And I just wonder if there's any lessons that you think we can learn from these other industries in helping us and guiding us.
Completely. I wholeheartedly agree with that. You know, hence the saying the push is, it's the right thing to do when you see where the productivity that the automotive, aviation, retail is starting to achieve. And we've actually got a work package called Learning from Others that we've got to get out to the shipbuilding industry and try and see how they've codified it. You know, how have they managed to drive these efficiencies by having, if you like, a standard set that are right the way through. So we're working with them. We're also working with others that have done their way BIM adoption to try and break it down, try and get that understanding. And I think often it comes down to the key thing of an intelligent data set as well. How can that help start to influence, your engineering solutions? So completely agree, and we will be working with each of the industries to help. I mean, one of the main ones that you saw in the slide pack was retail. We've started to work with the retailers already to try and say, how do they leverage the data set? And we'll be doing the same with the car industry and the aviation as well. So yeah, I completely agree that the paradigms that these guys have had over the last 40 years, we've got to learn from.
Hi, it's Rufus Logan from BRE Scotland. I'm interested in could you explain who the early adopters are, some examples of where they come from, and a supplementary to that, as I think I might know the answer in terms of the type of people, for the small and medium-sized enterprises that make up the vast majority of the Scottish construction industry, how do you see them being able to adopt or actually play in this world of BIM?
Rufus, great question. And it's quite funny. I think it's not always the most obvious people that are the earliest adopters. I would say the best example we've seen of early adoption has been sometimes the SMEs. The small designer, I think sometimes you can compare it to ships. The SMEs, they're often a bit more agile in how quickly they can turn their course. The bigger companies are a bit like the super tankers. I think the best example I've seen in probably of the recent year was a small architectural practice down in London, David Miller. David tells the story that, it was him and these two architects, and they talk about how they try and improve efficiency in what they're doing. They made a technology investment, as they said, the first time it was just about buying a technology that they bought, and they got really good at it. And what did that mean? They became much more efficient in terms of how they designed, especially in terms of detailing, if you like. What that meant was, said, well, by becoming more efficient, we were able to take our fees down. We started to win more work. By winning more work, we started to take on more architects. And they said, we got to the point where you were starting to drive efficiency, and said, well, we can't really take our costs down anymore, but we can start to bring added value in terms of what we're doing as well. So he's went from, the team of 2 architects up to, I think, now 16 over a short period of space, just by improving efficiency in terms of what he does. We've also saw quite a few early manufacturers starting to build some quite intelligent object libraries. And I think it's fair to say as well that in terms of the object libraries, there's a few people out there now as well that are starting to provide some really good solutions. But I think we're starting to see the early adopters coming from all places, from the main contractors to indeed, I think some even clients now are starting to get, in terms of what BIM outcomes they want, not just saying, we want BIM. So I think it is right across the board, but I think the best examples have probably came from some of the small to medium players in the market that want to innovate and cross that innovation chasm. Probably the ones that have been the most hungriest to actually, keep winning work.
Adrian Shilliday from Miller Construction. You talked earlier about the legal implications of BIM, and that's still being researched. In terms of the product libraries, NBS are starting to collate modelling components. Where is the responsibility for the quality of those model components and the information data set that goes with that. And if our design team includes those elements, who's responsible for the quality and accuracy of those components and handing over to a contractor?
Well, at the end of the day, I mean, that will be, I mean, NBS will be, I mean, there's lots of product libraries out there that we've seen. So I'm guessing that would be between whoever you contract with and, if you like, the contractor. But you're right, I mean, the quality of data we think is key to this. And we mentioned that the data drops, so we want to be able to use them, you know, as a litmus test to actually start checking the quality of data. It is part of, you know, the work package we've got at the moment, but largely at the moment we don't see any change in the way the contractual liabilities are. In terms of level 2 BIM, level 3 and beyond, things will certainly change.
Okay, and I'm thinking in terms of procurement types as well. A contractor sometimes is handed tender information, he's got a limited time to price, and may not always be able to fully check if it's a very complex project.
You're talking about a data set that's been given you from a client, or?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, at this point in time, I must admit, you know, it is a work package. We're starting to look at the whole legal. It's not one how could you put it? You know, I think Paul Morrell says, you know, he's maybe down there in terms of his BIM experience, I'm maybe a bit higher. But I know round about me, we've got the experts that are dealing with, if you like, the commercial legal aspects and doing it. So these packages, if you like, will start to come out around about March. They'll start to give the guidance round about that. So I think it'd be unfair of me to try and out the top of my pocket at this moment in time. But it's a great question.
Hi, Graham Stewart, Bureau Happold. Who do you think ultimately owns the building information model?
Who owns it? Well, in terms of the data within the model, I think you saw in the slide that the lady with the crown on.
Yeah, is it going to be like the design team, the client, or does the building own it?
Well, at the end of the day, we see the building owner owning the data set, if you like. I mean, the IP in that is a different question, but at the end of the day, we very much see that data set being owned by the client on the level 2 procurement jobs, but very much, yeah.
We've seen in other areas, whether it be structures, for example, structural design, elements whereby the structural design and modelling is because of the 24-hour global clock, how everybody operates around the world. We've seen UK companies actually sending that data to Singapore, Malaysia, India, China, where it's being processed, and when these engineers come back in the next morning into the UK's office, all the data is sitting there waiting for them to utilise. So could BIM actually, whilst we might have expert services here, could BIM actually lead to the migration of that income stream to the professional services in the United Kingdom to other BIM modelers around the world?
The answer to that is 100% yes. What we've seen already is a concept of BIM storming, where you can very rapidly prototype. You know, you maybe start off with your design, as you rightly say, in Australia, starts to hand over to some point in maybe Europe, across the UK, across the East Coast America, finishes day wherever, San Diego, and then back again. So you start to get a very rapid cycle in terms of be it prototyping or detailed design. So I think as you know, our technologies advance in terms of how we share data, I think we'll start to see things happen a lot quicker. So Sean, I completely agree. I think that's the way that we'll start to go as this global economy goes, that things will start to happen faster, and BIM will be very much a catalyst to make that happen. I think you already see that with maybe software licenses that follow the sun. I'm sure design paths will start to follow the sun as well.
Derek Jones from Kepi Design. David, I just wanted to ask your opinion of where you think Scotland is at this moment in time. I mean, obviously it's great to hear a Scottish voice that's representing the industry down in Westminster. Obviously the Scottish Government has its own sort of documentation for, if you like, for public procurement, which is very different to the Westminster one. Where do you think Scotland stands, and how much trouble do you think we're in if we don't start to get on board with this very soon? Not that I'm biased in any way.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could give you my view as David Philp, rather as opposed to the Cabinet Office one in that. We've had probably the last 2-3 years a lot of really good discussions UK-wide in terms of BIM. And I think if somebody said, you know, where's the biggest BIM footprint, I would say it's probably in 2 places at this moment in time. It seems to be London and probably round about North England, round about Manchester and Newcastle for some reason. That, you know, that there's people for those reasons in terms of key design practices or such like that really seem to, or key, you know, learning houses, that there's much more of a conversation going on with. I think Scotland, I don't know, is very traditional in its mindset in terms of behaviours. I think we've got to try and push it on a bit harder up here. In fact, you know, we'll probably been, in terms of BIM conferences, I think in Scotland this will be the second one that I've really seen in terms of the agendas. You know, there was the BIM national event, which is fantastic again to see a real audience in Scotland. But I still think the conversation in Scotland is still very much as BIM a fad, as opposed to how quickly can we move it on. We're still having the industry, you know, is this still a good thing to do, as opposed to how do we make it happen. So I think it's a case that different places, different companies going at different speeds. But I think Scotland can catch up very quickly, especially if it gets its training and education agenda set out properly as well. I think, as we also said, it needs the agents for change as well. And I'm sure the people in this room, if they start going out and socialising the message, whatever may that is, you know, if it's social media or whatever, but, you know, let's start spreading the word and start getting Scotland ready for BIM.